There are places on this planet where stepping forward is not an act of exploration, but a countdown. Where the air itself feels hostile. Where the ground radiates heat, like an open furnace. Where your lungs pull in nothing useful, and your blood quietly begins to fail you. You don't see the danger at first. That's what makes it lethal. In California's Death Valley, the air can climb beyond 56 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, your body's cooling system turns against you. Sweat evaporates too quickly to regulate heat. Blood thickens as dehydration accelerates. Within minutes, your core temperature begins to rise past the narrow margin that keeps your organs stable. The human body functions around 37 degrees. Push it to 40 and proteins begin to unravel. The danger isn't dramatic, it's silent. Heat stroke doesn't arrive with warning sirens. It begins with dizziness, confusion, subtle disorientation. Your brain swells as internal temperature climbs. Cells lose structural integrity. Without rapid cooling, the system collapses. In extreme desert conditions, survival time without water can shrink to hours, sometimes less if exertion is involved. Now imagine the opposite extreme. Antarctica holds temperatures that plunge below negative 60 degrees Celsius. Cold this intense doesn't just make you uncomfortable, it extracts heat from your body 25 times faster than air at room temperature. Skin freezes in minutes. Blood vessels constrict to preserve your core, starving fingers and toes of circulation. Ice crystals form within tissues. Hypothermia begins quietly. Shivering gives way to lethargy. Decision-making deteriorates. The heart rhythm destabilizes as electrical signals falter in the cold. At a core temperature of 28 degrees Celsius, unconsciousness becomes likely. Without intervention, the body simply slows until it stops. The landscape remains still and white, indifferent to the failure happening within you. Travel north to high altitudes, like Mount Everest, and the threat shifts from temperature to oxygen. At 8,848 meters above sea level, atmospheric pressure drops to roughly 1/3 of what your body evolved to handle. Each breath contains far fewer oxygen molecules. Your lungs work harder, but your bloodstream cannot capture enough to sustain the brain. Within minutes at extreme altitude, without acclimatization, hypoxia begins. Judgment fades. Coordination weakens. Cells starve at the microscopic level. Prolonged exposure can trigger high-altitude cerebral edema, where fluid leaks into brain tissue due to pressure imbalance. Even standing upright becomes an act of negotiation with gravity. As your nervous system misfires, descend instead into the deep ocean, and pressure becomes the executioner. At depths beyond 3,000 meters, water pressure exceeds 300 times that at sea level. The human body is not built to withstand such force. Air-filled cavities collapse first. Lungs compress. Without a reinforced vessel, survival is measured in fractions of a second. Pressure affects more than structure. It alters chemistry. Gases dissolve differently under compression. Nitrogen can infiltrate neural processes, distorting perception in divers at far shallower depths. At extreme pressure, even cellular membranes deform. Proteins change shape. Life at these depths exists, but only because evolution rewrote the rules for survival. Volcanic regions introduce a different form of invisibility. Near active craters, the air can carry sulfur dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and carbon dioxide in lethal concentrations. These gases displace oxygen and interfere with cellular respiration. Hydrogen sulfide, even at low levels, paralyzes the sense of smell before shutting down the body's ability to use oxygen effectively. In places like Ethiopia's Danakil Depression, temperatures soar while acidic pools bubble with dissolved minerals. The water's pH can rival battery acid. Contact damages tissue instantly. Carbon dioxide can accumulate in low-lying areas, forming invisible pockets that suffocate without warning. There is no dramatic signal, just the sudden absence of breathable air. Then there are hyper-saline environments, such as the Dead Sea. The salt concentration is nearly 10 times that of the ocean. While floating seems harmless, ingestion of highly saline water disrupts electrolyte balance rapidly. Cells lose water through osmosis. Muscles cramp. Heart rhythm destabilizes as sodium levels spike beyond what the body can regulate. Each of these environments attacks a different vulnerability. Heat overwhelms thermoregulation. Cold strips metabolic energy. Altitude deprives oxygen. Pressure crushes structure. Toxins sabotage respiration. Salinity disrupts chemistry. The human body is a masterpiece of adaptation, but only within a narrow band of planetary conditions. Beyond that band, physics and chemistry take control. Temperature, pressure, atmospheric composition. These are not obstacles to negotiate. They are limits, written into our biology. Cross them, and systems fail with startling speed. No predator required. No storm necessary. Just the quiet certainty that Earth does not guarantee survival. And scattered across the planet are still more thresholds waiting to be crossed. Zones where radiation seeps invisibly through tissue. Where the ground itself shifts without warning. Where storms generate forces our skeletons were never meant to endure. And we are only beginning to step into them. And beneath those storms and shifting ground lie forces even less forgiving. Places where the planet releases its rawest energy without warning. Far below the sunlit surface of the ocean, hydrothermal vents tear open the seafloor and superheated water erupts into near-freezing darkness. The contrast alone is violent, liquid, heated beyond 400 degrees Celsius, meeting water, barely above zero. A collision of extremes that would overwhelm human tissue in seconds. At those depths, pressure exceeds 250 times what your body experiences at sea level. Every square inch absorbs thousands of kilograms of force. Submersibles must be engineered like armored spheres, because unprotected lungs would compress instantly. Even if temperature were somehow controlled, dissolved gases behave unpredictably under that pressure, altering nerve signaling and destabilize the chemistry of life itself. Descend further into the Mariana Trench, and light disappears entirely. Nearly 11,000 meters down, the weight of the ocean presses with such intensity that metal groans. Pressure there surpasses 1,000 times atmospheric levels. Human physiology has no mechanism to adapt. Proteins deform. Cellular processes designed for surface conditions cease to function. Survival, without extreme protection, would not be measured in minutes, but in fractions of a second. Yet the ocean is not the only place where invisible forces gather. In 1986, a volcanic crater lake in Cameroon silently released a cloud of carbon dioxide. Lake Neos had accumulated the gas in its side depths for years, trapped under pressure. When it overturned, the heavier than air all rolled downhill like an invisible tide, displacing oxygen as it moved. Carbon dioxide is not toxic in the conventional sense. It simply replaces what you need. In high concentration, it floods the lungs without delivering oxygen to the bloodstream. Cells suffocate. The air feels deceptively normal. There is no smell, no color, no dramatic signal. Consciousness fades as oxygen levels drop below the threshold required for brain function. Radiation operates with similar invisibility. In the exclusion zone surrounding Chernobyl, decaying isotopes continue to emit ionizing energy decades after the reactor fire. You cannot see it or feel it as it passes through tissue. But at the cellular level, radiation tears electrons from atoms, fracturing DNA strands and disrupting replication. Damage accumulates quietly, unpredictably. High doses overwhelm repair mechanisms rapidly. Bone marrow, which produces blood cells, becomes particularly vulnerable. Immune systems weaken. Organs lose regenerative capacity. Radiation sickness does not require dramatic exposure. It depends on intensity and duration. Variables often impossible to gauge without instruments. The danger lies not in spectacle, but in the unseen alteration of biology's blueprint. Elsewhere, methane pockets gather beneath permafrost and ocean sediments. Methane is lighter than air and highly flammable, but in concentrated form it also displaces oxygen. When released suddenly, it can transform breathable atmosphere into an asphyxiating cloud. In enclosed basins, or low terrain, the gas lingers, silent and odorless, turning stable ground into a chemical trap. Unstable terrain presents its own deception. Quicksand is not a mythical swallowing force, yet saturated sand under pressure loses its solid structure. The moment weight shifts incorrectly, grains separate and liquefy. Friction vanishes. Legs sink rapidly. Not because something pulls downward, but because support disappears. Panic accelerates movement, which accelerates sinking. In arid basins where heat accumulates and wind barely circulates, toxic gases can pool near the surface. Some desert depressions trap hydrogen sulfide released from geothermal activity. The gas interferes with cellular respiration by inhibiting enzymes responsible for oxygen utilization. At high concentration, a single breath can disrupt the body's ability to extract energy from air. The ocean, again, holds unpredictability in motion. Rogue waves form when multiple wave systems converge, stacking energy into a single towering wall of water. They rise without warning, sometimes exceeding 25 meters in height. The force delivered by thousands of tons of moving water overwhelms steel hulls. For a human in open water, reaction time disappears. Thermal shock presents yet another boundary. Sudden transition from extreme heat to cold or vice versa forces blood vessels to constrict or dilate too quickly. Rapid cooling can trigger cardiac arrhythmias as the heart struggles to maintain electrical stability. Sudden heating destabilizes proteins and enzymes tuned to narrow temperature ranges. The body depends on gradual change. Nature does not always provide it. Even the ground beneath stable landscapes can shift. Tectonic stress accumulates silently along fault lines. When it releases, acceleration ripples outward in seconds. Structures collapse, not because they are weak, but because the Earth itself moves faster than reflexes can respond. Stability proves temporary. A pause between pulses of stored energy. What makes these environments truly lethal is not just intensity, but unpredictability. Pressure builds unseen. Gas accumulates quietly. Radiation persists long after visible disaster fades. Waves assemble beyond the horizon. Heat transfers faster than nerves can interpret. The systems that keep you alive operate within precise limits, and outside them, the margin for correction vanishes. And across ocean trenches, crater lakes, desert basins, frozen tundra, and shifting seas, the pattern remains the same. This planet is sculpted by forces indifferent to human design. Survival here is not a birthright encoded in the landscape, but a fragile alignment of conditions that can tilt without warning, reminding you that comfort is temporary, and the Earth was never built around us.